Welcome to another episode of the Sparkles of Gold Astrology Manifesto podcast. My name is Nicolas Polymenakos, aka Sparkles of Glittering Gold. I'm doing this podcast on March 28th, 11:50 a.m., and I'm in a different time zone. I'm on the road right now. This might sound a little bit different from my other podcast, but this one's on the road. There are train tracks and ravens and really bright sun that I've needed. To be honest, I needed the ravens. And then when I went to cross the train tracks, there seemed to be lots of ravens and crows around. And there was a dead carcass. And that's, at that moment, I realized and reclaimed a part of myself that I haven't seen in a while. And it's like, oh, this is where I belong. I belong in the in-between space, in between two railroad tracks with the ravens and the carcass, close to death, but always reaching for life. So it's March 28th. I'm going to talk about the next several days of astrology and some of the transits, some things on my mind. I put out a little quick podcast yesterday on the Mars and Gemini transit that happened over the last 7 months and some thoughts I had about that. You could check that out on my playlist. This particular podcast is going to go from here Tuesday the 28th, and I'll go to actually probably April 5th. I won't get into the week after because I'm going to do another video and a podcast for that. So thanks for listening to the intro. And my chart says right now that it's Cancer rising where I am at. And Mars is at 1 degree Cancer and the moon's at 4. Last night, where I am traveling, was a beautiful, clear night. And if you were able to check it out, there was a certain alignment that happened in the sky with certain stars, and it happened at dusk. And Mercury, which is currently in the sign of Aries, and Jupiter in the sign of Aries have their conjunction going on right now together. And in the sky last night, they were parallel to each other on the ecliptic at dusk. So you only had a little bit of time to see those two, Mercury and Jupiter, in the west. But if you followed the ecliptic going higher up, then you saw Venus in Taurus, and man, she was looking good. And then eventually you got up to the moon and Mars in Cancer in the sky. They were conjunct, and they will be tonight too. So that's the kind of place I'm in. Railroad tracks and vultures and ravens and beautiful aligning stars. So that's how we start here on a Tuesday. We got a moon in Cancer, and it's interesting because it's the first moon in Cancer that happens because of Mars being in the sign of Cancer after Mars being in the sign of Gemini for 7 months. This is the first Mars moon conjunction that happens with Cancer. So what are we talking about here? What are we always talking about? We're talking about tears, comfort and protection, and soup on the stove, and comfort and emotions and what one feels. And with Mars being there, magnifying it, propelling it, the driving engine behind emotions. And Cancer being a cardinal sign is the initiation of this, how, depending on one person's chart, so on and so forth. Eventually here, because of the Aries birthdays and Chiron and Jupiter and Mercury, the moon is going to make aspects. This Cancer moon is going to make aspects. When we get into Wednesday on the 29th, we got the moon's going to make a sextile of Venus in Taurus. So we got water and the earth vibing. That's pretty good, actually. I'm digging that. But then right after that, in the morning at 10 a.m., we got the moon then squares that Chiron in Aries in the cardinal sign. At 12:39 p.m. Pacific, sextiles Uranus in Taurus. Then at 4:34 Pacific, the moon squares Jupiter in Aries, and eventually later on at night squares Mercury in Aries. So we have, a cardinal signs squaring each other. And if you never appreciated an earth sign, you appreciate it now, because Venus and Taurus and Uranus and Taurus are there for this Cancer moon, and anything water, Saturn and Pisces right now. And we want this. That's our go-to place, because the other stuff can get heavy with Chiron and Aries and the moon and emotional volatility and the expression of that with the wound and all that kind of stuff. And if you've been listening to my podcast, watching my videos, you know what's up with this Chiron deal. So, anyway, when we get to the 30th, which is a day I'm digging too, actually, because the moon, is gonna in the Cancer is gonna trine Neptune and Pisces. We start off the day that way, and then that's kind of the last aspect the moon makes in the sense in Cancer. So that's good, and it kind of ends it in a waterfall of intuition and a connectiveness to the divine, with moon and Cancer and Neptune and Pisces. And after the last 24 hours of the caustic energy that happened with moon and Cancer with all the airy stuff, we have some healing place, an oasis, a place where the visionary medicine can be infused at the end of this moon and Cancer story. And if you can't hear it now, there's my train, the train tracks, going somewhere, anywhere. I'd like to get on that train, and I don't know where it's going, and that's the reason why I would like to get on. Anyway, so when we get to the 30th on Thursday, we start off that moon trine Neptune, and the moon goes void, of course. But at 12:03 p.m. on Thursday, Mars in Cancer makes its official exact trine with Saturn in Pisces. Now, I'm going to stop here because two of the biggest transits of the week happen here on the Thursday, the 30th, and this Mars in Cancer connection, free-flowing connection in Saturn and Pisces, is a good start to the Mars in Cancer transit, because of the moon aspects we had the last couple of days. But with an or a stronger planet like Saturn and Pisces, newly ingress Saturn into Pisces. It hasn't been there that long. It's an interesting water connection, an emotional situation of giving structure to feelings, giving structure to emotions where emotions could take us, especially with the sign of Cancer, which inherently, I think, deals with security and protection. If you think about the way a mother is, or whoever plays a mother role, and what they will do for the family, for the crew, setting up a stable, emotional place at quote unquote home, so one can emotionally process through their feelings. This is if it's running optimally, by the way, and the Cancer moon, or the moon mother, isn't overbearing. And I'll get to the overbearing part in a second. But, here is where one could be comforted and soothed. And if you have this in the part of yourself, if you're learning about what quote unquote home is, this is what you do at home. You regenerate and you process your emotions and you go through them, and however long it takes, make sure you go through them eventually. Mars in Cancer is going to want to drive this, but with Saturn coming in, Saturn in Pisces is going to give it some structure. And since Cancer is a cardinal sign and they initiate, they kind of get up and go, and in this case through the emotional process. Saturn in Pisces is going to give out structure, but it's going to bring structure with a little bit of different angles and views and mutability to how one deals with emotional processes. Sometimes the Cancer archetype, as this train goes by, the Cancer archetype can get stuck in one particular part of the emotional process and get stuck in a pain cave, as I call it, as in kind of stuck there, and bring people with them. And it gets heavy and the tears don't stop, or let's say it's not tears. It's hot, it's emotional, and it's volatile, especially after coming through the airy stuff the last several days. So here, sometimes we need the movement. We need help and movement. And Saturn in Pisces brings a structural, mutable movement to this. And so this is a good thing. The interesting thing about this is Mars trine Saturn. This happened several times here in the last several months when Mars was in Gemini and Saturn was in Aquarius. And this is sort of pretty kind of connected to it, even though they're both Mars and Saturn just entered new signs. It's within a month they were there, within weeks. So there's remnants of a Mars Saturn trine in air signs, but here the air moves into emotions. And in a sense, that air trine that happened with Gemini and Aquarius moves out out of the upper chakras, if you're into that, out of the top of the head and into the body. Or the head recognizes and starts to congeal and recognize the emotional spaces and the emotional stories that are within the body and how they show up. And here they show up in a great way. I think you want to utilize this and set yourself up, because it's going to be needed in the rest of the Mars and Cancer transit that's going to happen into May, because there's some funky moments. That's for another podcast. But the major lunation next week is going to have some hardcore involvements with all this, so on and so forth. So saying that, it's a great transit. Explore your emotional content, explore your emotional world, ritualize it if you can. I always believe that with water and water signs, that if you're in these types of spaces, that you do take a bath, you do take a shower, create the ritual from it, have a cup of tea, things that can soothe you and soothe your emotional narrative. Okay, so that is moving there. And let me get this right here, because I'm on the 30th, as I said, that was 12:03 p.m. Sorry if I'm not completely focused here, because I'm in a different space. But later, when we get to, it's within 3.5 hours at 3:25 p.m., we have another major aspect of the week. And for me, a kind of last major aspect that happens for the month of March that brought a major aspect or relation between planets pretty much every single day from March 1st here to the 31st. And this is Venus in Taurus making a conjunction with Uranus in Taurus. That's the heater in the background, by the way. I can't control things. I have to let go. And Venus conjunct Uranus in Taurus, a fundamental moment in first of all, the eclipse story that's been happening in the sign North Node of Taurus, South Node in Scorpio. This is at 16 degrees Taurus. If you have anything in fixed signs between 14 and let's say 18 degrees, you're affected by this. If you have anything at 16 degrees fixed, huge. If you're a Taurus, huge. Relationships, Uranus, out of the blue, unexpected ways of looking and dealing with relationships and with money. If you're directly affected with this in your chart, there's a alternative view of living through the senses and through pleasure and accepting pleasure. There's an alternative view of how one acquires and constructs resources, Venus and Taurus. And Uranus brings another outside view, something out of the blue, at times to shake up something that might be monotonous in this continuing story that's been happening in the Taurus Scorpio world. So, this happened last year. I know this happened last year because it happened close to my birthday. It was in June when we had the last Venus and Uranus conjunction there. So you can go back there to, May of 2022, June of 2022, because we had the eclipses there. And then we had this that were involved with Uranus and Venus in Taurus. And then we had the exact conjunction. And here we are at another marking point. And this actually sets up the next chapter in the story, which is going to be in May, when there is going to be an eclipse at 14 degrees Scorpio on May 5th, 2023, 14 degrees. This is at 16. Wherever the Scorpio and Taurus parts of your chart are, we have more action, more part of the story of bringing in something new and letting things go. South Node, bringing in something new, North Node. But I'm not going to just leave it at that kind of mentality. There's both extremes type of energy that happen in the North and South Nodes. There's a pulling out that can happen at the South Node in Scorpio, and an overindulgence, an influx of huge energy that comes through the North Node in Taurus. So it's not good and bad. Sometimes it's like you have to have a different kind of perspective here with eclipses and the nodes. And you have to kind of take into account of North Node doesn't mean that's the good place and the South Node's the bad place. It's not that at all. Sometimes the North Node is all consuming and brings an all consuming energy. And if it's in Taurus, it can indulge. You see what I'm saying? Scorpio can indulge too. That's one thing they got in common, by the way. They'll take it to the limit in their fixed sign type of way. But I just want you to make a note here, because Venus, Uranus, I dig this aspect, but be careful too of the setup, of the overindulgence setup, so on and so forth. Now, one more thing I'm going to say about this. Venus is at home here in Taurus. We like this. We vibe with it. You're always going to hear me harping on living through your senses, right? And, I'm all about it here. And so this is a different way to do it. If you're going to catch this podcast after even the day of tomorrow, before, this day on the 30th, on the Thursday, things do happen mathematically with the Mars-Saturn trine, and here comes the Venus-Uranus conjunction. But it's already happening now on Tuesday the 28th, the 29th, 30th. It's going to linger through the weekend. You got interesting water, that's water with depth, and then you got a electrical, spectacular movement with Uranus and Venus. But here it's water and earth. And if you can incorporate that in your sensory world, where you are bringing in water and bringing in earth, if you have the ability to be barefoot outside and buy water, do it. If you can have the sound of water running in the background, and you're in a sense eating some good food and pleasures through the food, that's a way to incorporate these two aspects. I'm digging this. We needed this at the end of the month after a huge month of change. There is the vibe of walking through the door, as I've said before, in the new chapter in people's lives and society and the world's lives. And there's overlapping stories from the past. And we're going to be playing this 1 foot in, 1 foot out game for the next year and a half because of Pluto and its story with Capricorn and Aquarius. But here in a moment here, we want to set ourselves up here, at least until the end of May, on this Thursday the 30th, because of the insights that come through emotional processing and the insights that come through our senses from an earthbound way, and Venus being at home in the sign of Taurus, and some sort of spark, some sort of new vision, some sort of alternative and open way of looking at things. And it could be a idea, a spark, a different objective view, but try to stay in your senses. Try to stay in your body. Okay, that was off the top of my head. When we get to 331, the moon goes into Leo. Interesting, at 331, moon into Leo, and like within 10 minutes, the moon in Leo makes an opposition to Pluto in Aquarius. So this is the first time we're going to have a Leo moon and Pluto in Aquarius opposition on the mundane political world news level. Expect the 29th through the 1st to have some interesting stuff go on that level that's connected to the Pluto and Aquarius story, which will be for the next 20 years. All right, let's move into Friday. Moon in Leo is going to square the node. It's going to trine the sun in Aries. That's a good thing to start the weekend. And eventually at night, the moon in Leo is going to trine that Chiron in Aries. Two fire signs vibing together. We want this after the Chiron story in the last month of immense amount of movement and healing in the Aries part of your chart. But we just had the beginning of this podcast talk about the moon in Cancer bringing heavy emotions to all this. When we get to April 1st, we pretty much, I'm looking at my notes here, that moon is going to then square off with the Taurus planets, Uranus and Taurus, Venus and Taurus, a little extra chapter in the story for the conjunction that happened on the 30th. And then later on in the day, the moon in Leo is going to vibe with the rest of the fire planets, Jupiter in Aries, Mercury in Aries. And here we can have some amazing creative expression. If you could find a place on the weekend to like make art or create or write or have good conversation with the people that you trust and express yourself, do it, because you're gonna need it after this last month, okay? So of change. When we get to the 2nd, which is the Sunday, moon moves into Virgo and will oppose Saturn in Pisces. And I'm going to leave it at that. Listen, thanks for bearing with me on this podcast. I don't know how much noise is going to be there. I'm going to just throw this up raw. I don't know if I'll put it up on YouTube, but I could tell you on a personal level from not just my own life, but from the conversations that I've had with clients lately and the messaging that I've been receiving through all the social media outlets, because people message me, as you can imagine, with questions and inquiries and insights that they have, is when I'm going to go back to again. Things are never going to be the same. And just we can go back to this last year and the type of transits we have. And on paper, we have Saturn that moved into Pisces. Pluto in the Aquarius is going to play that game for a while. Mars just went into Cancer. It's springtime in the Northern Hemisphere, fall in the Southern. There's a switch up happening. And so everyone I've talked to, the stories that I've noticed, there's a kind of a goodbye of sorts. And if it isn't a goodbye, it's a metamorphosis and a switch up and a change and a different way of moving here. And I think with that, it can bring a lot of inspiration and feeling of breaking free and a sense of vision and hope. At the same time, there's the other part of stories like this where it's hard to break free or to switch up. And maybe it's hard to let go, depending on your life situations. But everything is in flux. Everything is moving right now from the astrological sense. And I notice it with everybody else. And I notice it within me. For me, it's the ravens and the crows and the clear night sky and the tracks that lead to nowhere and everywhere, those train tracks. And that's where I am. Obviously, I would do my podcast, my YouTube, and do my stuff, but things are shifting too in my world. You might see some of this reflected in my podcasts and some YouTube videos here that I will finally be putting out and showing more of myself through and in. So if you dig what I'm doing, rate it, like it, share it. My website is sparklesofgold.com. I got 2 specials going on till the end of April. Special reading just for Saturn and Pisces and what that means for your chart. And one on Pluto and Aquarius, which people have been taking advantage of. I've been having a lot of Pluto and Aquarius bookings. Think about that. Think about if you were going to pick one planet to work with, and if you were an astrologer or counselor, and you were going to talk about it all the time for 2 straight months. And then let's just say you didn't really think about what you were doing, but you did it. And in this case, it's Pluto and Aquarius. So I'm living the Pluto life every day. I usually do because I have deep Pluto story in my world, personal life always, but more than ever now. And I flourish there. And if you are looking for more insights with Pluto and a little bit of understanding, and it's a tougher thing for you, maybe I can help you out and help you flourish there too eventually. On that note, thanks for listening to this impromptu on the road podcast. Anything else you want to know about me, sparklesofgold.com. Find me on YouTube, Instagram, and the rest. Until next time, you owe it to you to do what you want to do.